Hello, Professor Crane and class. Welcome to a space rooted in history, race, and rebellion. You've likely heard of critical race theory, but today I'm going to explore it with you as living knowledge. Often misunderstood for centering race, CRT actually reclaims stolen wisdom. Through the DEIPAR lens, I'm going to connect CRT to plant-based medicine. And by the end, we'll all see herbalism through CRT as a powerful, evolving form of resistance. You might be wondering, what do plants and race have to do with each other? And that's a fair question. But before we get there, we need to look at what's holding up the bridge to CRT, the philosophical underpinnings. CRT stands on critical theory, social constructionism, and has a bold critique of liberalism. It doesn't just call out inequality, it pulls back the curtain on the power structures that keep it alive. Social constructionism reminds us race isn't biological, it's assigned and weaponized. CRT names race as a tool of hierarchy and challenges ideas like colorblindness and legal neutrality that pretend racism was already solved. CRT dives beneath surface fixes, challenging slow reform and legal myths. It draws from sociology, feminist theory, post-colonial studies, and more. One might ask, was CRT built for communities of color or by communities of color? And the answer is simply both. It was forged by scholars of color for communities of color. In 1976, Derek Bell questioned whether civil rights laws truly served Black communities. Kimberly Crenshaw introduced intersectionality in 1989, and Mari Masuda and others expanded the movement's depth and cross-cultural reach. These scholars didn't theorize from ivory towers, they dissected discrimination from the front lines. CRT has always centered diverse voices. Today, that work continues to evolve into public health and healing work. And CRT stands on bold truths, and that's that racism is systemic. Race is socially constructed and is a tool of inequality disguised as biology. And this helps us understand how racial justice only tends to advance when it aligns with dominant interests. And through it all, CRT invites, and through it all, CRT insists that lived experience is not anecdotal, it's expertise. And that's why herbal wisdom remains vital. Black midwives have had better outcomes than hospitals since the 1930s. Yet, modern medicine still continues to favor hospital births, even despite research. And that's not coincidence, that's systemic bias. Black and Indigenous knowledge shouldn't only be embraced when it saves Black lives. It must be honored when it protects Black women too, especially in a field like obstetrics, which was built by experimenting on bodies of enslaved Black women like Lucy, whose pain was dismissed to benefit modern medicine. Applying CRT across communities requires nuance because good intentions can still miss the mark. Take the unique voice of color. Yes, amplifying marginalized voices matters, but expecting one voice to represent a whole group is like using one seasoning for every dish. It flattens richness and puts the burden on those already navigating oppression. Applying CRT to groups not centered in its research, like white populations, takes clarity. Because CRT spotlights race, some non-minorities may feel their class or gender struggles are being sidelined. Others may view critiques of whiteness or colorblindness as personal attacks rather than invitations to reflect. Even when applying CRT to white groups or mixed groups, we must avoid essentialism. And that's because privilege and oppression aren't one size fits all. CRT research centered in Black, Latino, and other racialized communities. Early work examined students of color navigating academia, refugees seeking safe haven, and disparities in therapy. Today's work continues that legacy. But many studies lack demographic breakdown that show how well they reflect general populations. And this is where a quantitative critical race theory steps in, a statistical approach that gives CRT sharper tools to measure racial disparities. Because racism isn't a glitch, it's the system. When applying CRT to herbalism, we see similar erasure of traditional knowledge, repackaged for mainstream profit. Reclaiming plant medicine is reclaiming what was stolen. While CRT centers race, DEIPAR widens the lens. Social justice doesn't stop at race. It stretches across class, ability, and more. When assumptions narrow the focus, I use DEIPAR to assess and question. I practice diversity and uplifting multiple ways of knowing and healing, including those erased from dominant narratives. I pursue equity by advocating for access to ancestral medicine that has historically been denied to Black and Indigenous communities. And I commit to anti-racism by actively challenging the structures that exploit traditional knowledge. I lean on inclusion as a way to honor all forms of knowing and difference, and I turn to power analysis to question who benefits from being kept from this conversation. Justice isn't a spotlight, it's a full stage, and DeepR helps ensure everyone gets to stand on it. CRT also helps me challenge the power dynamics in medicine and the idea that clinicians always hold the answers by calling out structural racism in diagnosis, treatment, and in whose voices are centered. I reject colorblindness and center clients' lived experiences as expertise. Medical hierarchies rooted in colonialism dismissed Indigenous and Black practices while stealing from them. Native knowledge was the foundation of the first pharmacy books, but in 1962, the FDA banned many Native medicines unless pharma-backed, giving the notion that Native medicine was inferior. Diminishing its power. And while using frameworks to analyze power and apply theories to real world injustices are important, it's not enough to reduce the masses to promote healing. There must be safe places to learn and practice this skill too. And this is why schools like Rootsworks Herbal matter. To me, it was more than a program. It was a sanctuary where Black and Indigenous wisdom isn't labeled as alternative, it's honored as foundational. Through scholarship, mentorship, and community, they show that education can be resistance. And completing their herbalist training rooted me in tradition that goes much deeper than textbooks. As a social worker and herbalist, DPAR shows me that it shapes how I live. Sipping nettle tea is an act of nourishment, but it's also remembrance. Using herbs is my way of practicing diversity and healing, reclaiming equity and knowledge, and creating inclusive spaces where traditional knowledge thrives. It's also power analysis in action because it helps define who medicine is and who is left out of medicine. It's cultural, it's anti-racism, choosing practices that resist cultural erasure. And then the intersection of all of this is reflection. And I ask myself, am I uplifting to heal or to gatekeep? This is my experience, lived practice, resistance sipped with purpose. But as great as CRT is, it still must evolve to meet additional needs of health and healing work. First, let's clarify language. Race is still too often seen as biological, so social workers must shift and adjust how we communicate CRT, especially in mentally rigid or under-resourced communities. We need a broader framework, and for that, I suggest changing CRT to critical health justice theory. This expands CRT to expose health inequalities, protect traditional knowledge, and promote cultural healing. Schools should also combine Indigenous wisdom and science and invite healers like Maria Sabina into classroom. Maria was an Indigenous medicine healer whose work shaped psychedelic research, but her knowledge was appropriated without credit. We need to protect land as ethnobotanical sanctuaries, enforce intellectual property rights that prevent biopiracy, and follow community models like Rootsworks Herbal and Harriet's Apothecary, where ceremony, herbs, and justice meet. The roots of CRT will stay firm, but our approach must shift and adapt. And since I'm invoking names you think you know, let me tell you a story. Harriet Tubman wasn't just a conductor. Picture her in the woods, bloodhounds howling, children shaking. She pulls out wild lettuce, bitter and calming, and places drops on a child's tongue, creating safety and silence. This isn't survival. It was healing as resistance. Picture her in the woods, bloodhounds howling, children shaking. She pulls out wild lettuce, bitter and calming, and places drops on a child's tongue, creating silence and safety. That wasn't just survival, it was healing as resistance. Harriet's wisdom came from Black and Indigenous roots passed down despite every effort to erase them. But here's what I want you to take away. Choosing herbs is not alternative. It's ancestral, rebellious, a wildest dream. CRT teaches us to challenge power and reclaim truth. Herbalism teaches us to heal with what the earth gives us freely, even when systems try to rename and resell it. Imagine a world where an indigenous grandmother's remedies sits beside a pharmacist's prescription, where herbalists are honored as healers and scholars. We can cultivate a future where ancestral knowledge and modern medicine grow together, co-crops in our healing garden. Thank you.